Good evening, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Bigfoot Forest Giants podcast. Good evening, everybody. We got some technical difficulties going on back there. What is that, Bobby?
I have no idea.
Does
I have
somebody
no
have their phone
idea.
going? I know what it is. My phone's going, and it's on. I'm watching the comments over on YouTube. That's what that was.
Yeah.
I was like, what's going on? Yeah, so I'm watching the
And
shadow.
you were thinking about blaming me.
Oh, no, I'm still gonna blame you. You got to remind me to tell you to turn my phone off. That's what happened. How you doing, man?
Better, I guess.
Better. Well, I can say that you
Yeah,
must be doing better.
Speaking of wells, my well went out last week, 4
Yeah.
years old, and I had to spend another $500 to have the wires replaced because the wires that hook up the motor only covered for a year.
Well, all I can say is you clearly have the funds for it. I saw a post of your wife flexing on how much money you guys have today. She
You
put
got
a
to be
post.
out of your mind.
Nope, she put a post out with like 6 eggs in it, eggs in a bowl.
Oh.
That's some serious flexing, man. You got eggs. You can get if you can get eggs, you've got some money. And I'm going to talk to you after the show about a loan because she had a bowl full of eggs, and I'm like, look at you flexing about your money.
I got two 18 packs, I'll sell you.
I have to go on the black market for that. Well, welcome everybody for being here. Sorry about that little snafu. I had my volume on my YouTube on my phone so I could watch the live. Turns out I can also watch it on here, but I get distracted when I see us and listening and watching. I only got a brain and it's that big. And everybody, Sasquatching Strategies. That is Clay. How you doing, bud? It's Cashew's out there, and it's Diane and my wife. She's always here to say hi and support us. Tonight we got a great guest, Jeff Meldrum. Great guest, Jeff Meldrum. Jeff is a professor of anatomy and anthropology in the Department of Biological Science at Idaho State University. So, I barely graduated from high school. That's all I got to say. I barely graduated from high school. So we got somebody who's going to talk to us tonight, and we're going to talk what we know about Bigfoot, what he knows. And I'm really interested to find out where the study and the research of what he's done over the years has taken him, where in the world it's taken him, what he's learned in different parts of the world, what's his favorite places that he's researched, and when he's been out there, are there, if any, similarities of the things that he's found from location to location? You know what I mean? That'll help us out. And then I want to talk prints. He's the print professor. So I'm really excited. Much larger brain than I do. Dr. Jeff, how you doing, bud?
Hi, good. I'm doing very well, Blake. Thank you.
Good. I am overly excited about you having the time to sit with us tonight. It's only going to be about an hour or so, but this time goes by quick, especially when you have a good guest on that have knowledge and that we can all learn from and whatnot. We find that sometimes just doesn't last long enough.
Yeah.
Well, there's always another time too.
Yeah. Earlier, just right before we were talking, a couple weeks ago, we had Doug Hychak on from Monster Quest, and he was talking about one of the well-known documentaries very hardly known documentaries because it's hardly been seen because it was a while back. Was the Giganto, the real King Kong.
Right.
And he said he couldn't find it anywhere. And Bobby found that link. And also Mark Kimcho found that link also. Probably about 10 minutes after you had it, Bobby, he sent it to me. And so I was joking when I told Doug, I'm like, I'll have my people get on it. And I don't have people. Bobby's my people. But Mark said he'd be my people too. So Bobby and Mark found it right away. And I watched it. And it was... To me,
good.
Even though it was
good.
so old, so much older than the newer stuff, it was one of the better things out there.
Production quality was great, and the information hasn't really changed that much.
Yeah,
we know we've continued to add to the puzzle, essentially putting in more pieces, but so far there's still just a lot of blue pieces going into the sky. Hasn't changed the perception very much. So
yeah. How hard was it for you to initially take that step into researching this phenomenon?
Well, it wasn't really. I have to say, while there was a little sense of foreboding. I mean, I wasn't naive in the sense that I was unaware of the ridicule that had been heaped upon Dr. Krantz, my predecessor, and I had that little conversation with myself. On the one hand, do you really want to get involved with this? Because look where it got Dr. Krantz and what it did to his career, and delayed his recognition, his credibility, damaged his credibility. And on the other hand, the voice is saying, but how could you not? I mean, look at this evidence before you. I mean, after I had firsthand interaction with some of that evidence, namely the footprint evidence, seeing footprints in the ground, not just any old footprint, but remarkably impressive and an extensive example of footprint upon footprint, 35, 45 clear individual footprints in that stretch of muddy road. It's like, how could you walk away? How could you not? I mean, they really do exist.
Yeah.
Sasquatch walked by here just last night. I mean, there was no question left in my mind after seeing that, given my skill set, my experience with footprints. And I mean, I'm not saying I can't be hoaxed.
Right.
As Dr. Krantz got himself into a little trouble on occasion saying, but it's got to be pretty darn sophisticated if it were to be a challenge to differentiate from bona fide evidence of Sasquatch. So with that right in front of me, how could I walk away? So I mean, that's what I'm all about. Science for me is exploration. It's not just simply doing the rote work to establish already agreed upon conventional wisdom and consensus. It's it's the excitement is when you have something novel, something innovative, something that is a bit controversial, that tests your powers of observation and discernment and analytical abilities. So it wasn't that difficult a decision to make. That's right.
I know that I have watched many documentaries and many of your appearances on TV shows, TV series, and whatnot. Where along in your journey into this, how far along in it did it take you to accept that these are really real? Because earlier in your career into the research of this and in some of these documentaries, as somebody who has seen one, two really close, it used to drive me insane to hear you say, if these creatures exist. And for me, it drove me insane because it left that doubt from somebody in the scientific community saying, if they exist.
Yeah.
And I've been almost within hand's reach of two in the same evening when I was a child. That mentality of being right there, these do exist. I'm screaming through the TV. How can you say if they do? But
right.
Also I come back to it again. Barely graduated high school. I don't have that scientific background and that degree
Sure.
and the knowledge that you do. And you have to say things and do things because you are a scientist. You're a doctor.
Professor.
Professor. So my question is, how far along in this process from when you started to where you are now, did you accept that they are real?
Oh, well, very early on. And let me clarify, because it's interesting to hear you say that. The perception, your perception of my statement didn't reflect my mental state in saying it. Because as a scientist, science is about positing questions. It's about and conclusions are in the hypothetical realm remain tentative in the face of the accumulation of additional evidence. So it's always an open an open case until you have that physical
Right.
evidence that conclusively demonstrates it. Now, seeing it, I mean, for you personally, that was a very persuasive, convincing experience. And this is another thing. Oftentimes people use the word belief. You are convinced based on your experience. Some people might believe based on their reading, their watching of documentaries, their fascination with the subject. But that belief is kind of a position of faith. They're expressing a conviction in the absence of evidence, whereas you are convinced by the evidence. Likewise, I was convinced very early on. In fact, I wouldn't have probably have been, as we started off, I wouldn't have been motivated to venture down this path unless I was quite convinced that I was and confident in what the outcome is. But in talking to my colleagues, in discussing our hypotheses about what this creature is and its nature and behavior and position in the world, the if is just simply an expression of that tentativeness that we're trying to come to an understanding. A friend of mine here in town has a t-shirt print shop, and I've often drawn attention to this. He showed me one time he had done a t-shirt design for a client, and basically they had taken a stencil of or a sort of a silhouette, a very simplified representation of the Patterson-Gimlin film in the background, and then it said across the bottom, "Believing since 1967." And I said, "Oh, that's cool, but can I make a revision?" He said, "Oh, sure." And I took a big Sharpie off his desk and I put a big line through "believing," and I wrote over it in bold block letters, "Convinced since 1967."
Yeah.
And so, I think it's a for some it's just semantics, but I think it's a very important point, because there's also one of the better known ideological skeptics out there, Michael Shermer, has promoted or championed the notion, the adage that the science starts once you have a body. You need to have the body, see, in order to do any science. Well, that's ridiculous. The science starts when you ask a question and you go about trying to answer that question by scientific means. In other words, by the gathering of evidence to support or to refute your hypothesis.
Yeah.
You don't sit around on your laurels and wait until someone, as some of my colleagues have suggested, till someone drops a Sasquatch on the bench in front of you and say, "Okay, now you can start doing the science." Well, no. Yeah, there will be a lot more science undertaken then, of course. But the science starts way before that. You'll never get to that point if you don't.
Science starts when you see the footprint and say, "What in the world left that?" And
well,
you
that's
start,
right. You ask a question. What's responsible for that, and how do you go about determining the answer to that question?
Yeah.
And the way in which the manner in which you go about that determines whether you're going to be scientific or not, objective, critical, reliable, analytical. Those kinds of terms describe the process.
Yeah. So last year we had the privilege of seeing you when you came here to Florida, the Great Florida Bigfoot Conference.
Yeah.
You were here with David Pilates and no, it wasn't last year. It was the year before last.
2 years ago.
Year before last. It was the year before last. You were here with David Pilates and Sierra Sounds, Ron Moorhead.
Oh yes.
And some others. Your line was so long. Your line was so long.
A lot of people.
Your line was so long.
Everyone has a story to share.
Yeah. You got anything to add to any of that?
No, other than the very best part of that conference was at the end when all of the speakers were sitting up there on the stage and you and Dave Pilates were going back and forth about that was the best
prime time
conference.
Yeah, we apparently have a tendency to do that. There was quite a dust up down at the what was the one in Gatlinburg with Marty Pippin. I can't remember what he calls his down there now, but Smoky Mountain. The Smoky
Yes.
Mountain one, I think it was. Yeah, and it was just a conversation. I mean, we don't see eye to eye. We're not on the same page.
Right.
But people, it's kind of like when family members. I'm not equating us to family members. But when family members, my wife and I, spar a lot, and having previously gone through a divorce when my mom and dad, met my wife for the first time, and we would have these little sparring. It's just fun. It's affection, expression of affection. But my mom goes, "Stop that! You're making me really anxious, really nervous." I said, "Oh, you have nothing to worry about. This is all good." Well, it's kind of like that. People don't realize that you can have an intellectual conversation, and it can actually it might seem a little animated, and sometimes it might have gotten. I may be downplaying it too much, but because I was getting a little impatient with some, because then it always kills me though, because we'll be having this kind of figurative fisticuffs, and then what does he do? He puts his arm around me literally and says, or looks at me and he says, "I love this guy. He is."
He's contributed more to the Bigfoot community than anyone else in the.
He slathers it on real thick. So then if you say anything that's confrontational, you're the bad guy. I mean, basically, it's a defensive posture. It's a defensive reaction.
Jimmy does that.
Rattling your tail.
Yeah.
Jimmy does that when we start arguing about something.
Yeah. That's my go-to.
Anyway. But it's unfortunate that there are some things that we disagree on very fundamentally, and the shenanigans that were perpetrated by Melba Ketchum are central to a lot of that disagreement, and there's nothing to be said about it. I'm unapologetic about my opinion of the misrepresentation and the the outright fraud of Melba Ketchum's, going, shenanigans, the best word I guess.
I know that it's hard it shouldn't be hard, but it seems like in this community, the Bigfoot community, the research community, I'm going to try, I don't want to paint it with a big brush, but sometimes somebody with a difference of an opinion automatically has something negative about whatever it is you're speaking about and what your beliefs are or what you think the facts are or whatnot. For instance, when on the Giganto, the real King Kong, one thing that really, 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 really aggravated me, one of the most things I've been aggravated about on anything that I've watched, is the guy that was, I can't remember his name, but he was all in on the Gigantopithecus. He's got the picture of him standing by the Gigantopithecus.
Oh,
and you know what I'm talking about.
I think it's probably Russell Shahan.
I think so. I couldn't pronounce his name because I got a little brain. But
no, it's a funny pronunciation.
Yeah, it's like CIOH. I wasn't gonna try. But he made this. Yeah, he made this broad statement of, no, Sasquatch doesn't exist, and everybody's either misidentifying or they're lying.
Yeah, I know.
Those are the words that came.
But he wants to jump on the Bigfoot bandwagon to promote his research into Gigantopithecus because he felt it never got the attention that it deserved. So he was just leveraging the
riding the curtails of the community. Yeah. And it drove me bananas to sit there and call thousands and thousands of eyewitnesses crazy, liars, hoaxers, or you're on drugs.
Yeah.
I've never done a drug in my life, ever.
No.
Ever.
Yeah.
I've seen 2. Bobby's seen 1. We gain nothing from telling the world what we've seen. I was terrified to go on TV and have the entire world hear a reenactment of my encounter on the Travel Channel. But once I did, I owned it. My father, because my father has been married multiple times, and so has my mother. And I was living with my mother at the time in North Carolina when my childhood encounter happened. Mm-hmm. My father didn't know until after this came out on television. I didn't have the courage to tell him. I kept it from a lot of people. Bobby was my best friend for 2-3 decades. He didn't know until 25 years later.
Yeah.
It's just not one of those things. But finally, when you own it, and then, but you got to stay with it. You can't just walk away with it, because if you walk away from it, then the world thinks you're lying.
Right.
But the whole thing with that was, you just insulting the intelligence of everyone, not even a few people, everyone. And I think you just can't do that. It's okay to be objective and to be skeptical, and you can either believe them or not believe them, but to call somebody a liar to their face is re-traumatizing them if they really went through something.
Right. Right. Well, and that's the key. If they really went through something, and even, and what I was going to get at is it's one thing to call everyone that claims to have had an encounter a liar. But it's another thing, though, I think, and something that's important to moderate this situation, to acknowledge that sometimes people do imagine things or over-interpret things. Put it that way. They see something. I mean, because I deal with this same principle when it comes to footprints. When it comes to the encounters, all you have is the testimony. You have the anecdote. With a footprint find, you at least then possibly have a trace piece of evidence that you can document, you can photograph, scan, make a cast, and then you can come back to it and evaluate it in light of that person's experience of it. And what I find when people share their footprints, their alleged Sasquatch footprints, a very significant proportion of them are not good, compelling evidence. They're either so ambiguous that they're useless, or they're so clearly misinterpreting what something else like a bear track or a human track. I mean, I deal with these on literally a weekly, if not sometimes a daily basis.
It's real easy to mistake
a
bear stepping its rear foot into its front foot
and double steps,
looking like a big old footprint, and it's not.
Yep.
But it looks real good.
Yeah. If those toes jump out at you, man, toes, that really establishes a search image and reinforces that perception. And so when you don't have that anchor, all you have is the story over here, then you realize, given the number of kind of misapprehensions here when it relates to footprints, there's got to be a lot of misapprehensions in the alleged fleeting sighting, or, a flash of fur or a shadow, things like that could be something else.
Yeah.
So you have to just take it in its totality. You have to be discriminating, I guess is a good word. But to eliminate all of them, I mean, it's one thing to sit in your armchair and, as a skeptic like Dr. Shahan, and poo-poo the entire thing, and it's another to actually sit across from an eyewitness who has seen something in broad daylight, perhaps in close proximity. When you have someone who's had an experience, say that emulates what you see on the Patterson-Gimlin film, you're going to sit there and say, you were mistaken. It was just a bear walking on its hind legs, or it was someone in just a ghillie suit, or was a hunter in camo, or it's you're right. It is absolutely insulting to those individuals. So
yeah, I know that that statement was one of those broad statements of, I'm right and everybody else is out of their mind.
Sure.
But I understood, just like you were saying, he wanted to promote his narrative and kind of ride the Bigfoot community coattails to do so. But for somebody who cares about other people and other people's encounters and stuff, it was just kind of slapping the teeth, kicking the stomach to everybody. But
if I may add,
go ahead.
One other point that one needs to bear in mind because to help to understand why and we'll just speak generically, a Dr. Shahan, someone like that, might adopt a posture like that, an attitude. It's the premise that they are operating under. And if you go back, if you roll the clock back several decades, back 40, 50 years into the 60s, in anthropology, when the Patterson-Gimlin film came out, when Ivan Sanderson published his big encyclopedic tome about these relic hominoids, about these ABSMs as he called them, the prevailing notion in anthropology was that the niche, the hominin niche, was so exclusive, so specific, there could be only one species occupying it. This is based on the principle of competitive exclusion that comes from microbiology and ecology and so forth, the niche concept. Well, if that were the case, then human evolution is seen as this single file progression. It's kind of like that iconic image of the single file march, with the upright ape and on through the various cavemen and culminating in modern Homo sapiens. If that's the way you perceive evolution to have occurred, where do you put another bipedal hominin like Sasquatch? There is no accommodating it. Therefore, they can't exist. So a Dr. Shahan says that's what he has in his mind. So these people must be imagining or lying because such a thing couldn't exist. That's changed now. We now understand that the pattern and process of human evolution wasn't a single file march, wasn't a single species hypothesis, as it was called. It was produced a very bushy tree with multiple lineages coexisting simultaneously, and some of those now in the recognized known fossil record persisting until remarkably recent. So you've got things like that could be the antecedents of something like an orang pendek. You have Homo floresiensis, or you have the Neanderthals in areas where Almasti are described in Russia, or you have something like, a relic ape like a Yeti with a divergent big toe, leaving a footprint that looks like a chunky chimpanzee. It's not that far out of the realm of possibility now. So anyway, so you have to give not that excuses the narrow-minded blinders attitude, but that's where it came from. And, because I always wondered why is there this visceral rejection? Why wouldn't science be open to the possibility? I mean, is it just because it's lumped in with all things paranormal and UFOs and Loch Ness Monster and ghosts and goblins and so forth, or is there something else? And then as I started to put these pieces together and to create the backdrop against which this phenomenon was occurring historically, is suddenly, there you go. That's why someone would say they can't exist, therefore they don't exist.
Gosh, I don't want, this isn't a question to put you on the spot, but I do kind of want to ask you questions that you haven't been asked 1,000 times. And when I ask this question, it is out of respect, and that's not to, when people say with all due respect, and it comes out a shitty comment, it's not like that. That's not what this is about. But I will say respectfully, just because this is respectfully, do you think it's possible that science has gotten some things wrong? And the only reason I'm asking that is because about this evolutional chart and about, the Homo sapiens, the Neanderthals, and the 12 or 15 in between, because there's this seminar that me and Bobby have watched on YouTube of this guy. Is his name Fred Pye or Lloyd Pye?
Lloyd Pye.
Lloyd Pye.
So, but what I know you're shaking your head, but when you see the bone structures of some of these progressions with the brow ridges, with the deep set eyes, is it possible that then the artistry of recreating what they look like, that maybe some of these weren't just skin, maybe they had hair covered, and maybe they're being misidentified as some of these could potentially actually be Sasquatch. But the artistry of what more humanizing them. You know what I mean?
Yes. There certainly is a social context that influences the way artists depict. Now, when they leave all the hair off, sometimes that's kind of a neutral position. They don't want to presume, but still, the way they choose the whether there's eyebrows or not, whether there are everted lips, how muscular do you make the lips themselves, and the nose, whether it's hooded or whether it's upturned or broad, you can the piriform, the opening in the skull determines that to some degree, but not entirely.
Yeah.
Not entirely. I mean, you can put, a Caucasian and an Asiatic skull side by side, and except for a very experienced,
Educated.
osteologist, you're not going to forensic anthropologist. You're not going to recognize a lot of those differences on the surface. Right. So you're absolutely right. Now, where I would draw the line, though, is
time out.
Yeah,
time out. Just a scientist on the planet Earth just said that I'm absolutely right. I can't get my best friend to say that I'm absolutely right on anything. He won't do it.
Yeah,
because you're not, Jim. There's always a curve.
Well, it's a qualified endorsement here. But what you have to be careful with is not just the interpretation of the anatomy, but then, of course, the interpretation of the behavior and the intelligence. Right. And so when you look at Sasquatch, these people who equate them with Neanderthals or with even Homo erectus, as a possible candidate, they don't match. You look at Patty. If Patty, is representative, and I'm quite convinced that she is, she has no stuff. In the words of George Carlin, she has no stuff. and that meaning she has no material culture. She has no modified tools. She has no stone tools, no bone tools, no wood tools. She just has her abilities, her physical abilities. When you look at her skull, her cranial facial proportions suggest a brain that's about on par with, say, a gorilla. Maybe a little bigger. I'd give it maybe 10 or 15% more, like an early Australopithecine, like a robust Paranthropus boisei from East Africa. When you take a Paranthropus skull and put it side by side with that close-up of Patty, she appears in that film, point for point, every single landmark of her facial proportion and the relative size of her brain case line up. So
I watched that show today.
Did you?
I watched that today.
Oh, you did?
You guys, I don't remember the name
two side
of it,
by side. Yeah.
But you were
stunning.
on there, and they had recreated the PG film with some like AI technology and
was that the Proof is Out There episode?
Yeah. And you guys were showing that skull and where everything lined up, and it was perfect.
What was the skull? What was the skull of again?
Paranthropus boisei.
So is that a type of?
It's a type of Australopithecine, a robust Australopithecine that inhabited East Africa during the early to mid Pleistocene. And so it lived alongside Homo habilis and Homo erectus in East Africa. It was a much more primitive, though. It didn't have consistent modified tool kits. It didn't, it might have used flakes or digging stick to get a root out of the ground. But, these are largely opportunistic uses of materials. Anyway, the point being, there's a potential. We with Gigantopithecus, we have something that's the right size in the right place at the right time, but we don't know for sure if it was bipedal. But with the robust Australopithecine, it has these remarkable convergences in the relative proportions and the specializations of this flat, robust face with big, flaring cheekbones and deep jaws and receding chin, and massive teeth, which we don't know for Sasquatch, but the only reason Sasquatch would have those external features and proportions is if it had these remarkable, enormous teeth, and lacking the projecting canines,
Right.
which, like in a gorilla, limits the side-to-side grinding. It's just basically open and close, open and close.
Right.
Sasquatch, as it's been reported by eyewitnesses and it's depicted in native art, have squared off teeth with no projecting canines.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting feature, which suggests that they had this ability to chew and grind and utilize a much coarser diet. But it's in the wrong place at the wrong time and the wrong size. It only stood about 5.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
But now, and so at one point I would have kind of said, well, those are kind of those are challenging things to overcome. But then, lo and behold, the Hobbit, Homo floresiensis, was discovered in Indonesia and shows the most similarities to Australopithecines in Africa 2 to 3 million years before. So what happened? There's a lot of chapters of the book that are missing between the time, 2 million years ago and 50,000 years ago in South Africa or Southeast Asia. So if an Australopithecine, a little 3-foot tall Australopithecine, could expand its range through available habitat through South Asia all the way to the island of Flores, why not something like a robust Australopithecine? And maybe as it extended up into the northern latitudes, as did so many Pleistocene mammals at that time in the northern latitudes, that's where they achieved their gigantism, the giant mammoths and their hair cover, the mammoths and all the predators and so forth. So anyway, I think either of those hypotheses is an interesting one.
Yeah.
And could because a lot of the adaptations I just described for the robust Australopithecines were almost certainly present in Gigantopithecus as well, with its enormous jaws and teeth and so on.
That's just one of the things that made me think about, when Lloyd Pye did his presentation. He's completely right. They made them look how they thought they would look, but adapting to the world back then, not having clothes, and I would think they would be hairier just naturally. I mean, it's their depiction, but it's strange how almost everybody that depicts them all over the world in the museums show them is without hair on their bodies, and you put hair on some of these things and it's what people are seeing, just a little bit smaller. But that's an interpretation. It's just an interpretation.
Well, sure.
Putting hair on them.
One of the arguments for the loss of our hair, our body hair covering, is that Homo sapiens, especially, I shouldn't say especially. In Homo sapiens, we find that the surface of our bodies are covered with an extraordinary number of sweat glands. This watery eccrine, the watery evaporative sweat that cools your body by evaporation. Gorillas and chimps don't have that. They have very few of those on their bodies. And so they can overheat quite easily. One of the protections that they have when they're out exposed in the sun is the hair covering. I mean, it prevents the excessive UV radiation. And so there's that trade-off. As the level of activity increased, the physical activity and the buildup of core heat that had to be dissipated by flushing blood up to the skin and cooling it by evaporative sweating, then that was an important innovation. Now, where did that happen? In human evolution. Well, the best evidence for endurance, running and walking, where that would be critical, doesn't appear until Homo sapiens, when we greatly reduced the weight, the robusticity of our skeleton. We'd reduced our muscle mass. Basically, we evolved a gene, the myostatin gene, and doubled it a couple times. If you knock out that myostatin gene, they've done this in some animals, like from mice to to beef cattle. When you knock out the a copy or two of the myostatin gene, all of a sudden they become, great big bodybuilders with
Yeah, bulked out. Yeah.
bulked out muscle mass. See, that's what myo means, muscle, statin to stop, to halt. So myostatin has halted the putting on of excessive muscle mass, and so we've evolved kind of into lean, mean running machines. So I would argue that it's been as recently as the appearance of Homo sapiens that we have lost the majority of our hair cover. That's why you still have so many people that express a lot of hairiness, because that gene hasn't been completely selected out. It pops up.
Yeah, as I've gotten older, I think a lot more of those sweat glands have moved on from my body to my head because it sure is thinned out up there a lot.
Yeah.
Well, throughout all your research and the places you've gone all over the world, where are some of your favorite places you've gone to research? And
Yeah.
did you find any similarities, if any, from place to place?
Oh, sure. Well, I've had a chance to go to quite a variety of places, of locations, and some of them quite exotic, some of them really fascinating in that regard. I think one of the most intriguing trips was the one to China, where we met up with a lifelong investigator there, Dr. Zhou Gujing, and at the Beijing Museum of Natural History or Paleontology. I'm not sure now, but he's no longer with us. But we got to go in the field and do some field work, as well as visit with several eyewitnesses. And the Chinese equivalent, the Chinese Yeren, is not just any old hominin. I'm convinced it is the Sasquatch equivalent. It's that Sasquatch has a circum-Pacific distribution, which extends then up to the west along skirting the Himalayas and on up into the mountains of the surrounding Mongolia and terminating in the Caucasus region. But good examples of footprints essentially equivalent to Sasquatch scattered throughout that area. And the real telling piece of evidence for me was when one of those witnesses produced a pair of footprint casts, and they were quite optimistic about the significance of this find, but they wouldn't let me see until they had the cameras rolling. They wanted to set up the interview and capture my initial reaction to the unveiling of these. And so as we were driving to the location, I gave Mr. Yuan, the witness, who was at the time was a park ranger at the time of the sighting, the track find, a park ranger at the Shenanjia Reserve, and he had witnessed a Yeren, and tracked it, followed it, found some tracks, and cast them. So he had a perfect right and left was reported. Well, I gave him a reprint of one of my papers. It was the paper in which I actually named the footprints attributed to Sasquatch. And we called them Anthropoidopes ameriborealis, the North American 8-foot, basically. One of the figures in that paper was a 3D scan of the very distinctive footprint from the Patterson-Gimlin film site, one of the 10 that were cast by Bob Titmus, that shows a distinctive pressure ridge. And it showed it in 3 angled views, so you could still. He saw that image, and oh man, he got excited. He recognized those footprints. Yeah. I go, yeah, okay, but he didn't speak one whit of English, and then they didn't want him to talk to me with the interpreter until we could do it. So we get there, we get set up, the cameras rolling. He opens up his little travel case, and out comes the toweling, and out come these 2 footprints, and they're dead ringers for the Titmus cast from the Patterson-Gimlin film site. This thing had apparently, as he attracted, it came up onto a spring, it's my understanding, and in the mud, stepped on the mud on the bank, but apparently squatted to, get a drink, presumably, because in so doing, it rocked up on the forepart of the foot, flexing at the transverse tarsal joint, and the weight pushed up a pressure ridge back into the heel imprint. Exactly in appearance. I mean, it was maybe a half inch broader. The foot was just a little more robust, but the toes were distinct. Not only was there a pressure ridge, but the position, the angulation of that ridge, because the talonavicular and the calcaneocuboid joints through the midfoot are offset just a little bit. So the pressure ridge doesn't run straight across. It's angled. It's canted upward and outward just a tiny bit. Now, no one would know that. Even if they had heard of my mid-tarsal pressure ridge theory, hypothesis, explanation for the foot architecture, there's no way they would apprehend the subtleties of those joint relationships. And then but you look at this, I'm trying to remember the dates here cold. His tracks were described in, I can't remember the dates now. I have a slide that have the dates. I'm terrible with my memory these days. But anyway, the point was, I hadn't even described the significance of the pressure ridge. I hadn't published any paper, let alone this description, this in-depth description, for more than a decade after he had described or discovered these footprints and made these casts. And so, where did he get his information?
Right.
Is this just dumb luck, blind luck, that he, incorporated this weird feature into a pair of footprints, and yet nailed it? So that, talking about convincing, that convinced me, as far as I'm concerned, as much as actually seeing the Sasquatch myself, because, seeing those footprints, that convinced me that this is real.
Did you just say you've seen a Sasquatch?
I have caught I caught a glimpse up in Alberta a few years back, but it was a fleeting glimpse, just a silhouette through night vision under very poor lighting conditions. Well, there was no light. It was dark, moonless night, and I had no auxiliary IR to amplify what I was seeing, to illuminate what I was seeing with the night vision. So just because of the contrast of the silhouette against the light-colored gravel of the roadbed, as it crossed, it was pretty well differentiated, but still kind of ghostly.
How long did you hold your breath? How long did you go?
Well, it was just a fleeting as it crossed the road, and I almost didn't say anything. I mean, my first reaction was to look, and see if it was just an artifact of motion or something, and I almost didn't say anything because I didn't want our host to take the ball and run with it, But on the other hand, I had to leave the next morning before sunup, and I wanted Dr. John Bindernagel was there as well. And I wanted John to, to cut sign and see if he could find any footprints on that path. We had been finding footprints in the moss, but they were about 13 and a half inches long. But, in the moss, the definition wasn't great. It's like stepping in memory foam, Except whatever this was so heavy that it crushed it right to the ground, and it didn't bounce back. Our footprints would bounce back. When we would backtrack back, and look for our own tracks, they were almost indistinguishable because the moss would rebound.
Yeah.
But these were fairly fresh, but still they had been crushed right down to the ground and were not rebounding. Anyway, we had been tracking. So I thought there was still a good chance that he could find some tracks, and they did. And it seemed to be following the course right where I had observed it, which seemed to confirm it for me.
No, that's awesome.
It was,
I mean, that's just like what you're researching, and it's kind of, even though you didn't get a detailed look, it just walked in front of you. I mean, that had to feel a little vindicated, and
Oh, sure.
everything. You know, I mean, like,
But
kind of
again,
even gets you into it more. You know.
well, it does. But the scale, I mean, because of the ambiguity, because of the marginal nature of that encounter,
Yeah.
that observation,
Somebody could
and
say you misidentified.
well, sure. And the
Yeah.
scale of it, for me, the footprints make a far more compelling
Yeah.
and objective, documented argument for the existence of this creatures, this species. I'll make sure there still are some misguided souls who think we're talking about a single monster roaming around the planet.
There's more than one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It changes
See,
colors from red to brown to
it,
black to white.
if you consider it as a singular entity, then it's easy to just simply dismiss it as a monstrosity, a monster,
Yeah.
figment of someone's imagination. But if it's a biological species and it exhibits demographics, little ones, big ones, what appear to be males and females, and a social, evidence of a social structure, they're relatively solitary, or females with offspring in tow, and they behave like apes. They do. This was why Dr. Bindernagel, mentioning Dr. Bindernagel, his book, both books, but especially the first one, really was just a wonderful establishment of the notion of a North American ape. And I'll emphasize that word because it irritates some people.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about an ape, we're talking about the superfamily Hominoidea that includes us and all the great apes. But we are quite different. Our level of intelligence, our material culture, our archaeological record, all of our antecedents, and back through Homo, all were using tools. These things don't use tools, at least not manufactured really tools or modified tools to any significant degree, at least not beyond what we see marginal examples of in the great apes. But John went through the primate literature, and showed the parallels, showed the remarkable consistency of things described for Sasquatch by people who had very little, by virtue of not a lot of education or a lot of world travel or exposure, or watching the National Geographic specials of Jane Goodall, or that they actually, these observations predated our current understanding. See, this is the part that always amazes me, is when I talk about the Patterson-Gimlin film, we have the advantage now of 50 years plus hindsight. And when you look at that film against the backdrop of what was understood then, it's completely counterintuitive. If you were coming up with something that you wanted to convince the scientific world of its credibility, by virtue of a hoax, you would never put this out there because they cut it apart. They criticized it from top to bottom because it didn't fit their preconception of the time.
Yeah.
But now, 50 years later, everything you see on that frame there is absolutely consistent with what we now understand about early hominin bipedal locomotion and behavior. To the extent, the lack of tools, the lack of refinement of the precision grip, the massive muscle volume, that she weighs nearly 700 pounds or more than 700 pounds. Anyway, it actually predicts in many, many ways what is now considered conventional wisdom, but did it decades before we had a clue.
Yeah. I want to do a real quick shout out, if I may. Yeah. Earlier back when we started this podcast venture, we started at the beginning of the year. We had Chris Spencer and Shane Corson from the Olympic Project on.
Sure.
Great guys, and they spoke super highly of you, and they were like, you really should get Dr. Meldrum on. And so I want to thank them for, suggesting that. And thank you for your time as well. I do also want to get into, this is going to be probably where, I'm being joking when I say it, but this is probably going to be where you may, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to show you some of the casts that we've got here in Ocala National Forest. Yeah. I'm going to, this isn't about me, but I'm going to put on big screen so it's for for everybody to see if I can figure out how to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
This is our three-toed print
Yeah.
that we got in the Ocala National Forest.
Yeah.
There's that ridge, and Bobby, go back to there you go.
All right.
It's 17 inches long from heel to toe. It's roughly 10 inches across the toes, and almost 7 inches across the heel. This was our very first pour, our first cast. So this right here is all over pour.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We found 17 inch, we found 15 inch, and we found 13 inch, and we found multiple tracks, all by structured areas. And this was something that Bobby and we did not want to show anybody, because this isn't what we were expecting. We were expecting to see something that looked like this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This makes no sense to us.
Right.
And we've got, how many casts of these we got, Bobby?
I've got 3 different sizes.
3 different sizes.
You know, the thing is, Dr. Meldrum, we've always said we don't know that it's a Bigfoot.
Nah.
But what we know is there's something big out there with 3 toes that is obviously in a family unit or society, because we have 3 different sizes of these 3-toed prints.
Yeah. Yeah, that is curious.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually have the original of that you can see has all of the ground debris and stuff in it.
Right.
But you also see a little more overpour and stuff. But
yeah,
to feel that big toe on this original, it feels just like if you were to reach down and rub your thumb on your big toe.
Yeah.
It's incredible, the ridges on that big toe that are like calloused, and you can feel those callus edges on it. If you ever come back to Ocala, I'll bring you this to let you feel it. And
yeah,
like I said, we can't say it's a Bigfoot,
right?
But there's something out there with 3 toes.
But there's also what we can say is we can say what it's not. We can say it's not a bear. We can say it's not an alligator. It's not a puma. It's not a deer. It's not an aardvark. It's not hogs. We can say what it's not. We don't know what it is, but we do know there is somewhat of a breeding population with 3 different sizes that have 3 toes, and we have never said that is a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. We've always said that there's something out there with a Bigfoot, though. Here
is a picture of that in the ground before we cast it.
Yeah.
We couldn't stomp an impression, and that impression is about 1.5 inches in places to 1 3/4 in places.
Yeah, it's deep.
And multiple places of the tracks in there. We got the pictures in there with the tape measures where I use sticks to frame out the impression. It should be in there.
They're not. I don't have them loaded in here.
Oh, you don't?
Have those pictures, okay. But that one was kind of the unmolested right after we found the print. It was like,
before we,
And you've been out in the field enough. You know it's hard to get a picture of a print.
Oh, sure.
Because you lose the depth with the camera. Yeah. But in that one, you can still see that.
Yeah, you can. You can see there's some depth there. What you should do now, if you're not already familiar, if you have a iPhone Pro, that has the
LiDAR scanner.
Exactly. You can do a 3D scan of your track and get that impression. It's tough to cast in Duff. I'm surprised that you got as good a result as you got, because the plaster just goes down around. The foot pushes the stuff and compacts it, but then when you pour plaster, it just goes down around all those pine needles, and when you lift it, you don't have the contact surface anymore.
No,
so you just have a kind of usually a mess. So that's
what his was. The original was his wasn't. Well, all I did was I took in sand. I took his cast that we casted, and I tried to correct the overpour. So over here, the
Sure.
overpour went from like here to here, and you didn't get to see it, but you could
Okay.
see on the cast itself that he made where the toe was, but there
Sure.
Yeah.
or where the V was, but it also had overpour like up to here. So, and then again, this was our first time ever even messing with plaster. So I took as much. It probably went out to here on the overpour.
Oh, sure.
You know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so
Well,
I
that's
tried to
what-
I tried to eliminate as much overpour as I could, so you could actually focus
Yeah.
on the print itself. That's why mine looks like it was in sand, because it was in sand. His,
Right.
it took him
Was
a
it
while to
leaf
clean that up, pluck pine cones out of it or pine needles out of it once it was dried.
I scrubbed that thing for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then there's another print that I have. Bobby, can you pull that one up with my? It's a smaller print. This one right here. Let me make this. Let me go back to doing this.
Well, here, let me hide this.
So this was
Yeah.
out on a path in sand. I'm a size 9. And you know, Bobby, go ahead and put that one picture back up so where you can see my size 9 on this. It's the same length. Put the one with my foot on it. It's the same length, but it's about 1.25 inches wider.
Yeah.
And flat. But there's another picture where I took of my arch. Bob, you have that in there? Yeah, so you could see under my foot, you know, the arch or whatnot. It's the same length, but it's so wide. And there's a hair in this cast that I didn't know until like a month or two after. It's in the heel. There's a hair literally in the heel. You're not going to see it. Oh, actually, You just did. You see it?
No, but I can imagine.
But it looks like an eyelash. Honestly, it resembles an eyelash. But I didn't
rodent hair then.
Yeah, or my eyelash, or there's a couple other guys out there that was with us when we found it. You know, but it is so much wider than my foot. There is no arch on it, and it's flat. And then there was a smaller. I got a picture of it too. There was a smaller, looked like an infant print out there too. I'll go back and find that, and I'll send that to you too. You probably get a billion of these things, and you probably never want to see another one again. But
no.
That's why I sent you the email about. Did you get many 3-toed prints?
Yeah.
And no,
not many 3-toed. No. So I have. Excuse me. This one is interesting because you have multiple prints, and if there is a remarkably consistent appearance to not only the multiple prints in a given size range, but then also 3-toed prints of different sizes and lengths. Now, the one with your foot pictured on top of it, I couldn't, at first glance, differentiate how many toes were visible. Could you discern whether there's 3 or 4 or 5?
There was at least 4, because this was in a different location. This was this was in Hungerland, down kind of southeast of Lake Okeechobee, down the west of West Palm Beach.
Okay.
So there's at least 4 on there. Before you could pour, you could see a little better. There was at least 4 toes on it, for sure. But there's no arch to this thing. And when I stepped into the sand, there was an arch. You know, it just made the shape of the contact of mine. So it's just like our buddy Mike likes to call them Flintstone feet. You know, big old club feet. You know.
Blocky.
But
Well, so my one cautionary note to throw out right away is your statement that there must be a reproducing population or a society. If these are from different locations, they have different number of toes, they clearly have different morphology. Why would you link them together?
Oh no, I'm not.
Well, that was the statement that was made. Is that your multiple sizes? Then,
no. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was all in Ocala. Those 3 toes.
That was all in Ocala.
Those were all in Ocala in the same area.
Okay.
In the same general area too. 13, 15, and 16. Those were right there in the same general area.
All right.
Um,
That's interesting.
Dr. Meldrum, I'm going to show you two more pictures in that same area we got those prints from. This
Yep.
picture was taken by a friend of ours, which when you see the picture, you see nothing until you zoom in and you find this.
can you zoom in anymore?
Now I can. I can't do anything. If he were to make it full screen on his end, he can probably see it a little better.
Yeah.
But there's definitely.
And that's that exact location where we had the 15, 17, and 13-inch prints.
Yes.
Of the three-toed. We are not saying that made it, but there's a face in there. But that's also, it can be considered pareidolia too. But it sure does look like a face, and it sure does look like it's staring at Kathy when she took the picture. She didn't know she was taking a picture
of the structure that you could see in that first photograph.
Yeah, she wasn't looking
and
back.
it was when she got home that she found that.
Yeah. I think we lost him. I think so. Oh no.
Oh, he's
there. He is. Let me bring you back.
It crashed for some reason.
Yeah.
Firefox shut down completely.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, I don't know what happened there. They're trying to suppress your information. The Men in Black.
Yeah.
I'm going to be raided here in just a minute and hauled off.
Yeah, the three-toed prints were in a completely different, at least 4 hours away.
Yeah.
Up in the Ocala National Forest,
okay.
North of Orlando, and I'm down here in Port St. Lucie, but where I do my research is near Indiantown, east of Lake Okeechobee.
Okay.
But yeah, so I should have been a little more clear. That was down south. Those three-toed prints were up north.
This is all right.
Completely different.
Well, my experience to date has been that no 3 or 4-toed prints where the toes are evenly dispersed. In other words, if it's not clearly an amputation or just a incomplete contact, I've not seen any credible 3 or 4-toed footprints. They're always misidentified or clearly hoaxed or just simply potholes. This one seems to have a lot of morphology. Now it concerns me a little bit that you did a lot of reworking. I'm glad you've at least got the photos
saved the
of
original.
the original prints.
Yeah. I have the original cast.
I wanted him to have the original cast because I know I would have broke it.
Yeah.
And with a feather.
So I don't know. I mean, I thought your comment that you weren't asserting that these were Bigfoot necessarily is an interesting one. I mean, it poses a rather significant alternative to accommodate somehow, because not just one anomalous aberration, but rather if there are different sizes, you've got supposedly this population of 3-toed creatures.
You can see when you line them up on a table, you can see characteristics that are the same through all three sizes of them.
That's
weird. If you do the Ocala conference again, I will bring all of them that I have and let you line them up on a table. And when you line them up, that's when you really see it. That it's like, wow, this runs right across all three of these.
And both right and left feet mirror images of one another?
I think we have a right and a left.
I think we have one right. We've got one left foot. The others all appear to be right foot.
This one's a left.
If they're both,
I believe this one's a left.
Both 3-toed. So, I mean, the toe count, the breadth, the credible Sasquatch tracks, they're never more than 50%, and usually under 50%. The breadth is 50% of the length.
Yeah.
So when you have a 17-inch track that's 10 inches across the ball, that's really blockish. That's very elephantine in its proportions. And so, I mean, it clearly has some differentiation of a ball region,
Mhm.
and the suggestion of an arch and a big, broad, enormous heel. But again, so they don't look like, they're lacking all of the characteristics that would define a Sasquatch
So,
track.
yeah, yeah, and
So
that's why we say we don't know what they are.
yeah,
Yeah,
But
we
in
won't call it Bigfoot because we didn't see what made it.
In
Right.
that same
know.
area, we have found several trackways. I have a video with one of them where, like 20 prints in a row, that
Oh, really?
Yeah.
none of them were good enough to cast because they
Oh.
were in a heavy forest floor.
Okay.
But
All right.
clearly good enough that you can walk by and say, "Here's one.
Yeah.
Here's one.
Here's
Here's
toes.
one.
You know
Here's, yeah."
that.
But we followed it about 20 feet, and then it looked like it dropped to a knee, and then maybe one more step, and then it just kind of, you lose track of it, But
Yeah, it's hard to see in that depth. Yeah.
yeah, but we found several trackways in that area. Like I said, not a whole lot of castable prints, but a whole lot of prints that appear to be three-toed prints when you look and you kind of feel with your fingers. It's like, I think it's three toes.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is. It could be
Yeah.
anything. It could be nothing.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's something when you line them up together.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. Yeah.
It's just
No,
like when you were talking about the science.
Well, sure. Yeah.
It's the evidence of something.
The depth of impression would seem to argue against, just somebody putting stompers, homemade curious.
They would have to have been 1,000 pounds. You couldn't have taken your fingertip and stabbed it that far into the substrate. We couldn't stomp an impression.
no.
Yeah.
That's what I think that's what got so weird and everything got heavy on us when we realized, damn, we can't even stomp an impression, and this thing's walking around leaving 1.5 inch impressions.
Yeah,
How heavy is
you
this
can't
thing?
stomp your heel into the ground, but this thing's leaving impressions a foot,
Just-
1.5 deep.
Sure.
Yeah, that
Well,
that made the fear kind of set in. Damn, there's something out here that weighs a lot.
The only the one possibility is if, depending on how old the tracks are, if there had been, a period of moist conditions with rain and so forth, that would change that relationship considerably, and that can make a big difference.
Uh-huh.
But it's hard to especially hard to gauge age in a subtle substrate like that.
A lot of pine needles. A lot of pine needles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
curious head scratcher.
Yeah, it is. That's kind of one thing that we use it in our logo and whatnot because it's unique. We didn't go looking for a three-toed print, but we sure don't see them out there a lot. We would love to have answers. Honestly, though, we have been other places where we have seen what appeared to be three-toed prints. Other places, but here in Florida.
Other places, but most of those three-toed prints we do find are still in the Ocala National Forest.
Yeah.
You get down around your area, everything you see looks to be a normal foot, but bigger.
Yeah.
So it's just in Ocala that we find those what appear to be three-toed prints. Only in Ocala.
They were south of the bombing range.
Sometimes 20 miles apart, but you
Yeah.
still see what appears to be another three-toed print. So, the Ocala National Forest is quite large. It's quite large.
360,000 acres or something like that.
Yeah, it's big.
Well, we sure appreciate you having us be here tonight and talk with us and
donating your time.
Yeah,
Sure. Oh, it's my pleasure. It's interesting, intriguing. I'll look forward to having a chance to examine those more closely.
And we'd love it. We'd absolutely love it. I mean, if you told us you guys are wackadoodle, that's fine. I've been told that before. But
it's not. It's inconsistent with what I'm familiar with. But
and it was with us too. That's why we hesitated for a while to let anybody know what we found because that doesn't make sense to us. We try to look at everything. It's around a whole bunch of tree structures. you know, and whatnot. Um, you know, and so that even
Yes.
added more to the puzzle. You know, at one point, Bobby and I thought we stumbled on a gold mine because we were finding hair everywhere. Everywhere we turned, we were finding hair just dropping out of the trees everywhere. It turns out that it's this stuff called horsehair fungus. It
Yeah, a
looks,
lichen. Yeah.
yep, yep. And we knew nothing about it. Well, I was telling everybody there's a Bigfoot out here going through chemo, man. It's just dropping hair everywhere.
Yeah.
But we had so much of it. That's when I looked at Bobby, and Bobby looked at me, and we're like, this can't be right.
Now I know where to find it and where it grows. And
Yeah.
I live on 10 wooded acres, and I can walk you to the type of tree that it grows on.
Right.
And I can find it on any tree on my property that is that type of tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's quite abundant when you know
Yes.
what it is.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But when you don't, you're out looking for Bigfoot, and you start finding 6-inch long hairs.
Right.
You think you've hit the jackpot.
No, I've put quite a number of samples under the microscope and photographed them, sent them back to the investigators. You know,
Yeah,
demonstrating.
and they don't look like hair once they're under a microscope.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what they look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
This was a great show, informative as well.
Oh, good.
I wish I could say you made me smarter. I'm too dumb to get smarter. Bobby would agree. He's trying not to shake his head now.
I wasn't going to argue.
But again, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight and have everybody. We had a lot of people that showed up because, you know, having somebody with a scientific background and able to look at things scientifically and objectively is kind of what's needed. It's what's needed. And again, we appreciate the time. What have you got coming up? You got any events coming up?
Oh yeah, 2025 has really filled up again. I was going to kind of pare back and not accept so many invitations, but it's hard to say no. I enjoy getting out and mingling and sharing ideas and hearing people's experiences, seeing the evidence that they've accumulated. So it's a great way, since I can't go out in the field really anymore due to some health issues, but I can interact with folks and see the things that they bring back in. So I posted on my Facebook page sort of a schedule of engagements for the coming year. And so you can find that if just turn to that Facebook page.
Right, and we'll try to get that up in the comments after the show so people can click on it. Are you're going to be part of some cruises?
They've switched from the Alaskan Bigfoot cruise to a Caribbean Bigfoot cruise.
Is that the one that's coming out of Miami?
My wife and I were invited. I'm not sure where the port of departure is. My wife pays much more attention to all those details.
My wife does too.
That I'm going to have my talk prepared and be ready to interact. We're going to probably do a couple of workshops. And
most Caribbean cruises, I think, leave either Florida or New Orleans.
Oh, it's out of Florida. Definitely out of Florida. I'm not sure what the port is and what the ports of call, but we'll probably just do a little some scuba diving, not scuba, but snorkeling excursions. And I'm going to talk about the notion of relic hominoids on a more global basis, since instead of the kind of regional emphasis we had on the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch. And so look at other hairy bipedal hominins and how Sasquatch kind of fits in to that phylogenetic tree, that family bushy tree of hominins and hominoids. So it'll be fun. It'll have a more more cosmopolitan flavor than the local Sasquatch lore. So but I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, as well as all the others. I mean, I've got from coast to coast. They run starting mostly there's actually one in a month and a half. I can't remember. I'd have to look at my calendar again. I write it down and then I don't worry about it. I put it out of my mind. Focus on what the immediate situation is. So,
have you had a chance? I'm just curious about it too. Have you actually had a chance to enjoy the cruises that you go on for Bigfoot, or are you just swarmed with people like me with questions and, hey, what do you think about this? And you really don't get much time to enjoy yourself.
Well, but I
You know what I
enjoy
mean?
that, but I
Okay.
do. We do have
Okay,
time.
cool.
I have time to spend with my wife, and we do these excursions, so we have smaller groups to interact with. We get to see that. We have our own cabin, though, so that we can retreat to that when when the need arises, so we can get some alone time. But it's no, it's fun to rub shoulders and interact, and my wife enjoys meeting the new people. We've made some good friends. We have socialized with some of the people we've met since, and so it's great. It's great to interact and to share that experience with people who have similar interests and have open minds to
Yeah.
the possibilities, and so it's great. Same with the some of the venues I speak at have kind of they that's the word I'm after. They accommodate a diversity of points of view.
Yeah.
So there's a spread of paranormal explanations for Sasquatch. There's one, the Phenomenon in Vernal, Utah. Of course, by virtue of its name, it's a very broad representation of paranormal phenomenon, from
Right.
ghosts, psychics, and Skinwalker Ranch phenomenon, and then
Right.
Sasquatch is represented amongst that as a cryptid of sorts. So it's a variety of venues, a variety of audiences, and so it's always a little bit of a change up with each experience. So it's fun. I enjoy it.
That's
It
good.
gets a little wearisome. The traveling, the romance of jetting off into the eastern horizon, that has tarnished long ago. I don't care for the long airplane trips and layovers
Yeah.
in airports and missing connections and overnighting, but I just I adopt the adage, I will be a willow. I will bend with the circumstances,
Yeah.
not get uptight. And, what can you do? You just
Yeah.
have to kind of
That
roll
was
with
kind
it.
of one of the purposes behind that question, because I don't think a lot of us, we go to these conventions and we see the main speakers, but I think we don't really take in consideration, as much as we are excited to talk with them and meet them and want an hour and a half to talk to you, even though there's 700 people in line behind me, type of thing.
Yeah.
That do you, the point was, do you actually really get a chance to enjoy yourself, or does it feel more job-ish?
What's
Because of what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out
Oh,
how to
sure.
say it.
Yes. No, you're right. There's an element of it that is work.
Yeah.
Some of my critics or some of the trolls out there begrudge me, say, charging an honorarium. And they go, oh, he gets up there and he talks for 90 minutes. And how much money does he get? Well, they don't know what they're talking about. It takes a day. When I go to the East Coast, it takes a day of travel, a full day, both directions, at least.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's usually a VIP event. You're rubbing shoulders with that. You're having dinners. I give my talk, one talk, sometimes two plus a Q&A panel, sometimes plus a workshop or two. I mean, I'm at the disposal of the organizer the whole
Right.
time that I'm there. And when I'm not talking, I'm at the table, as you point out, with a long line of people, not just hawking wares, and selling my books, but I'm interacting with people for
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
I never get to eat except when we go off to dinner or something. And so they don't realize how much effort you put into participating in that,
Yeah.
and the small compensation you get, the remuneration for travel expense,
For
I mean,
a week of your time.
yeah, they think
Yeah.
I should be donating not only my time, but I should be paying my way and
Right.
paying
That's
for the hotel and buying all my meals myself.
Nah.
That's kind of why I wanted to highlight that question on almost, is it worth it to you? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? And because we've done travel, and travel sucks, even when you're doing it for family. Go see family. That just the whole traveling aspect of it sucks, and you're going to see people that you love, and
Yeah.
Now you've got hundreds of people, pawing at you at every direction. At some point, have you been like, damn, I don't know if I want to do this anymore?
Oh, once in a while, just once
Yeah.
in a,
I got you.
a rare instance where you kind of feel that way. You're just tired. But like I
Yeah.
said, I can always pull the plug, and if I'm exhausted, and go back to my room and recoup. But
Yeah.
no, I enjoy it. I mean, obviously, when my health took a real dive, that first year back was a bit of a strain, and I was feeling it a lot more. This year I'm feeling a lot better, getting strength. Continue to get my strength back and
It's good to hear.
stamina, and it was a significant blow when you just about bleed out, and your organs are shutting down. Your kidneys stop working, your pancreas stops producing insulin, your liver shutting down, your heart is stressed, and who knows what it did to my brain. I still haven't quite determined how much damage there was to my brain for
doesn't
want
sound
of
good.
oxygen. But it was a long recovery. It
Yeah.
was a long recovery, and my body had to deal with that gigantic hematoma from the bleed into my upper abdomen, and it's taken its toll. So it was that combined with getting older.
Were you out researching, or was that something that happened on your own time, like at home?
I was on the cruise. I was on the Alaska.
Oh my goodness! Really?
The first
that's
one.
terrible.
No, it was quite dramatic because I got
bet.
up. I got up on the stage, and by that time I was running almost on empty. And I got up on the stage, started giving my presentation. All of a sudden, I couldn't think what the next line in my talk was, or the next slide. And then the world started, that
Blacking
passing
yeah.
out, closing in on me.
Many times.
Down I went into the chair. Luckily, they had a nice soft chair or else I would have been laid out on the floor.
Yeah.
And anyway, they had to evacuate me and so forth. And I mean, there were times when my blood pressure was down to about 60/20. It was, I was on empty, and they were pumping fluid in as fast as they could just to keep my heart from shutting down.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was an adventure. I tell you,
and that's why he's not going back to Alaska this year. He's going to the Caribbean.
No,
I'm gonna die in paradise.
Marty was kind enough to extend an invitation. He said, I want you and your wife to come and just be our guest and enjoy it, in good health this time. And I said, well, hey, I'm feeling a lot better. I don't want to be a dole on you here. If I'm there, I'm part of the program. Put me on the program. Yeah. So I participated fully on the second trip, and we had a great time and had some great experiences with excursions with the groups, and a lot of interaction with folks. It was fun. Yeah. It was fun to see the contextual, the environment, and just realize, even though you're just seeing that limited exposure from the coastline, just the vastness of that land and the forest coming right down to the ocean. It was just really impressive, really cool.
Well, we're glad you're doing better and your health is improving, and hopefully it continues to improve. We are going to call that a night. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciated the candid talk about anything and everything.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you won't, because I have very little to add, but if there's anything you ever need from us or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us. I mean, we'll do what we can, or, you got a better hookup than we do, but I do have people. Bobby's my people.
There you go. Yeah. Indispensable.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a great show. And hopefully we get to see you at convention, as long as you're not overworked,
Sure. Oh yeah.
We're all, hopefully we'll see you soon. But everybody, thanks for coming in the chat and sharing this adventure with us tonight. We had a great guest on tonight, and maybe someday he'll come back if he's in the area. We can do, if you ever come back to Ocala, maybe we can do a Ocala promotion on your presentation type of thing.
That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeff, man, thank you for being here. Bob, you got anything to add?
No. Other than it's been one of the more interesting shows. I always like listening to Dr. Meldrum, and about every time I turn on Discovery, I get to see him.
Yeah.
Right.
Wish I had a nickel for every one of those. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
you get some residuals off of Discovery
Yeah, I
Channel.
wish-
You don't
yeah.
have to do these conferences no more.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Thanks for
All
joining
right.
us tonight here on Bigfoot Podcast. If anybody out there has an encounter or knows anybody that's had an encounter and they want to come on and share it, just hit us up at bfforestgiants@gmail.com. Reach out to us. If you want to be anonymous and you don't want to be on video, we'll totally understand it. I've been there. Or if you just want to write in your encounter and you want to share it, but you don't want to be physically seen, because I understand the trauma and the ridicule that you go through when you have an encounter and then you try to share it with people and then you get beat down verbally online, on your social media accounts. If you want to anonymously share that with us, that'd be great. If you don't, I don't blame you, because sometimes it's more harming than therapy. But for me, it was therapy to talk about it as much as I could. Everybody, thanks again for showing up. We love you guys. We'll see you next time. Dr. Jeff, thanks for being here, bud.
Okay. Take care. Thanks for
Later, Bob.
Yep, we'll see you.